wait on the public easement, please. Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you. Oh, yeah, good. Huh? Oh, yeah.
To make this happen. I told her the idea, thinking maybe we'll put a panel on at CR. And she came back a couple days later with initially a week-long event. It was very ambitious, and it was very inspiring to see that. But we whittled it down to 3 days. I think this is going to be a really important conclusion to our time. I was able to collaborate with other people in the colleges. Dr. Maxwell Schnurr, Dr. Sarah Hart, Dr. Kente Johnson. And together over the last 5 or 6 months, we've been meeting together to try to figure out how to make this happen. Mistakes were made, successes have been there. I've heard success stories, I've heard people say that they have learned so much over the last few days. They've had transformative conversations at tables, and really, really eye-opening experiences learning from some of our speakers over the last few nights. Thank you all for being here tonight again, and those of you who came from previous nights. If you weren't here for the previous nights, I want to say a couple things just so you kind of understand the trajectory of the way this has gone. On our first night, we heard from speakers about some of the history and the context of Palestine and Israel and current events there. And while last night's theme was about understanding trauma and care, tonight's topic is about civic engagement as a broad category. We'll be talking about activism as well. And I want to center the table conversations again tonight because I know there are a lot of activists here, some from previous movements, some from current movements, and later I'm going to ask you to have conversations about that because what we want to do now, after all the things that we've learned and discussed together, is to figure out how to move forward for the sake of peace and justice, right? And we need to think about the kinds of philosophies, theories, and strategies that might be able to get us there. And I know that there's a lot of wisdom in this room that a lot of us can learn from each other in that process. So we're going to be moving forward with that discussion later. I want to just say a couple things about the ground rules for tonight before I bring up our next speakers. So there should be little handouts on your tables to remind you of the ground rules, but either way, when you signed up for this event, you would have seen the ground rules for this event. So I'm just going to kind of quickly summarize those for you if you didn't read them closely. So first, this is a community conversation. It's not a conference. It's not a teach-in. This is a community conversation. We're striving to make that the focus of tonight. As we hear from a couple of speakers tonight, we will do more of that in what follows. So first, please approach your conversations with as much kindness, empathy, civility as possible. I know that these are life and death matters that we're talking about over the last 3 days. They're charged, they're challenging, they're complex, but please do your best with that. Second, as a community conversation, this isn't necessarily the space for debating or protesting, although I believe that those are absolutely vital. Here we're focusing on conversations to start out how we conclude this evening. So please center that concern as well. And then finally, this conversation is for a lot of people here, including a bunch of my students. They're here because they're curious. They're here because they want to learn. And so there's an educative element to this, and I expect that we're all going to learn from each other in that process. So please proceed in conversations where that concern for open dialogue and educating ourselves together in conversation is at the center of what we're doing tonight, okay? So those are the kind of ground rules. I have a quote that our organizing team, we wanted to read in previous nights, and it wasn't read before. So in the spirit of this community conversation, we as the organizers want to share this quote from Sheikh Khalil Abba from the Tel Aviv Sheva Mosque, He writes, as the conflict in the Middle East reverberates around the world, many in the West have fallen into emotional traps of anger, fear, and righteousness toward the perceived other side. Exporting the conflict will not bring peace any more than will bring victory. And the only way to reduce the flames is to learn to coexist. And I hope we can make some progress on that tonight. So, with that, I want to bring up Bishop Paul Bagnacki to say a few words to welcome us. Thank you, Bishop Paul.
Thank you, Austin. Hi, I'm Bishop Paul Bagnacki. I'm the bishop here at the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in our Eureka Ward, and we just want to welcome you to our cultural hall. We know that there's difficult conversations to be had in our communities, but it's an important aspect that we engage in those conversations so that we can have healthy, thriving communities. Leaders in our church are asking our members and the world, for that matter, to be peacemakers. And that's an important aspect of the work that we do and the way that we walk and who we are as individuals. And we also believe in civic engagement, the importance of civic engagement. So I just want to say thank you for being here. Thank you for engaging in these difficult conversations. And we hope that it's productive, and we're really pleased that Rabbi Steinberg has reached out to us and invited us to host, and we're happy to do so. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Bishop Paul. So I want to get us rolling with first couple of speakers for tonight. First of all, the topic of this panel is about civic engagement, just the theme of the broad night tonight. So I want to invite Pete Blakemore, the Executive Dean of Arts and Sciences at CR. He's going to come talk to us first.
Hello, can you hear me all right? Yes, I'm sure. I do like a professor's voice. I can project without this thing. So when Austin asked me if I would be willing to present about civic engagement. Oh, okay. Is that working?
Let's
right?
get that.
Is that better?
Yeah.
Is that all right?
My real job is being a tech woman.
Thank you, Rabbi Steinberg. So when Austin asked me if I would speak about civic engagement, I foolishly said, yes, sure, okay, Austin. I mean, I've known him for quite a while, and he's a wonderful colleague. And so I said, you know, what do I have to say about this? And I thought what I'd like to talk about is effective civic engagement. And since we're here and we're talking about this, and this is surrounding a extremely. You can't hear me? All right. I'll use the microphone. How's that?
Yeah.
Better? All right. I thought, yes, I'd be happy to help with a discussion of civic engagement, but then I thought, well, let's talk about effective civic engagement. And for me, one of the things that I'm an administrator now, but I was a college professor and university professor for some 34, 35 years. So for me, one of the things that I've always tried to teach students in my classes is the best thing you're going to get out of a college education is how to ask better questions. And so for me, I'm going to start with some elementary questions here. And the first one I'd like to ask you all, when we start to think about effective civic engagement, I'm going to try to put a bug in everybody's ear here tonight and ask people to think to themselves, when did you change your mind? Try to think of an experience, a time when you had one position, maybe you had it for many years, and you were certain of that position, but then something happened in your life. You spoke with somebody approached you in such a way that you changed your mind. And I think if we start from that perspective, because if we're going to talk about civic engagement, we also want to ask ourselves, towards what end? And so, I mean, right now, as I said to Austin when he asked me about this, I said, we're not in the Middle East. I can't get in my car and drive to Tel Aviv to be in the middle of 100,000 people protesting against brutal government. But we can do things here, and our own government is playing a very important, powerful role in what's happening right now. So, just a little bit of background on myself. So those are a couple of questions that I would ask you. When did you change your mind? Can you remember a time when you changed your mind? What was it like? How did that happen? And how do positions change? for us. And then towards this, when you think about civic engagement, what is your goal? What do you want to happen because of your engagement? And now a little bit of background about me. I grew up in the 60s in New York, so you can imagine, those of you who have any kind of historical knowledge, you would understand that I saw Broadway shut down by 50, 60,000 people marching in anti-war protests. I was living not far from where the Black Panthers marched in Columbia University, with M1 carbines. It was a difficult time. When young people tell me today, God, these times are so polarized and life is so hard right now politically, and I think, well, things were a little bit like that in the 60s. And we remember it. I remember watching Walter Cronkite from Vietnam talk about during Tech that this war is unwinnable, and that radically shifted the population, the United States population, towards its thinking about a war. So these are really important things. So, and in college, I worked on the divestment against apartheid in South Africa. Some of you may realize that there was a movement that started in the 60s, but it really didn't take off until American college students really started to press. We built these shanty towns on campus. I'm going to get into this about why that was effective, but I did that. I was an environmental activist in timber towns for most of my life. Here, I taught environmental ethics. Austin teaches it now. I taught that here for 12 years. I taught environmental studies in Eugene, Oregon, another big timber town, and in Missoula, Montana. So, getting into the middle of these kinds of issues where there's a question, where there seems to be opposition, has always been a very important part of my life. And I was also the anti-racist white professor with a bullhorn in the quad on a University of Wisconsin campus. So, I've participated in civic engagement my whole career. And so I totally understand people's need to get out and to protest and to be engaged. I think it's super important. But I'm also a student of rhetoric and philosophy, and one of the things that I started to study more and more about this was this question of how do people's minds change, and what is rhetoric? What is, most of us, when we hear the term rhetoric, we think of it in that pejorative, oh, he threw a bunch of rhetoric at us and it was rolled us over, Rhetoric is a bad thing, but that's not the way rhetorical theorists think about it. We know that what rhetoric really is simply the study of persuasion, of how do you move people through argument. How does argumentation function in a community, in communication? And so I'm just going to give you my own thinking about this. Two vital touch points are, on one side we had the Platonic concept of rhetoric is cookery. This should be very, very apparent to most Americans today. When I say cookery, what I mean is, this is what Plato claimed through the mouthpiece that he always used of Socrates in the great work Phaedrus. He said basically to this young student who had come running to him with the sophist's speech, written out, and he said, what have you got in your pocket? I've got this beautiful speech. And Socrates basically just says, look, rhetoric is just cookery. It's just you figuring out what people like to eat, what tastes good to them. And so that's all it is. These sophists, what you really want is the dialectic. You just have to do the dialectic all the time. And his own student, Aristotle, said, no. Later said, that's not what rhetoric is. Rhetoric is the act of listening to what others who disagree with you about your perspective think, and then deciding whether what they are saying has any effect on the belief system, on the opinion that you hold. This is in a democratic, I'm using the air quotes here, sort of a democratic society, but property owners did have the ability to vote. So when Athenians were arguing about whether to go to war or whatever, Aristotle said what you have to do is listen to the others, the people who oppose you, and don't think of them as your enemies, but think of them as other members of your civic society who have their own opinions. And if you don't know why they believe and think about about how they came to the opinion, then you're not going to be able to persuade them. And the also that when you start to listen to other people's ideas that are in opposition to your own, what you do is you start to compare and think about your own reasoning and your own rationale behind why you hold your position. Your position will become stronger based on listening to those who disagree with you. Okay? So this is a super important part of the kind of the dichotomy of the Platonic concept and the Aristotelian concept of what rhetoric does. Another great theoretician, Wayne Booth, in the 1960s, late 60s, when he saw the kind of headbutting that was going on among people who were screaming at each other in the streets. That's what it was like. Just so you know, it was even more dramatic than it seems these days. We'll see in the next few months whether that happens again. But Wayne Booth said, you know, he had this concept of motivism, which is that if you start your argument, and when I say argument, I'm not talking about something that's violent or that's an attack on another person. An argument is really the way people like these philosophers that we're talking about right now think of it as. It's the way to find out what people believe and why they hold those opinions. Okay, and Booth said if you look at somebody and you say based on their clothing, based on the button they're wearing, based on the hat that they're wearing, that you know everything already before you even begin to speak to them, you think that you know their motivation, you know their beliefs, you know all that. The real argument has completely shut down right from the start. So think about that. That's all I wanted. So can rhetoric be effective? Can our thinking in these terms be effective? Well, I mean, I was just talking to Stuart, who's going to come up here in a minute, and Austin. And obviously, if you're a Jew in 1935 in Austria and a Nazi comes up, you don't want to find out what they think. That's not what I'm talking about here, right? What I'm talking about here is...
What about a Palestinian today with an Israeli?
Would be the same thing. So what you want to do is you want to find, in this country, you would want to find people who also may hold some of the same opinions that you do, or you know, if you are trying to persuade more people to move in a direction, you have to listen to them, right? You have to understand where they're coming from, and then compare that to what your ideas are, and move in a direction where you can get some effective change. We have really good examples of times where civic engagement has helped to make change, to make positive change. The divestment that I talked about in the 1980s, the late 80s, some of you might even remember this. It was powerful and it worked. It really did. It was a major portion of the reason why the despicable government in South Africa finally collapsed and apartheid was destroyed in South Africa.
It was also resistance, armed resistance that helped out.
Okay.
Not
This
just
is what I'm talking about.
It's been a major part.
What's that? I couldn't hear you.
She had said something else after that.
Okay.
She just made the point that in addition, the major parts were armed resistance and community building from a space where rhetoric wasn't necessarily, like, the other person's opinion wasn't necessarily needed to justify. And the purpose was to dismantle a position where people's interpersonal power had so much weight that the system was created around that. Undoing apartheid was about taking away the systems that allowed people to have that individual power, just like we're speaking to racism now. We're not necessarily saying that we need to listen to other people who are not calling this a genocide. We're not, the rhetoric that you're talking
exactly
about.
what I said.
The rhetoric that you're talking about.
Wasn't that my comparison by analogy?
No. You're saying that we need to sit and listen in a space.
No, you didn't let me finish.
Well, if we're having expert art, is there going to be necessarily someone who's going to be able to have another position on another side of the spectrum as this, another expert or something?
We have another speaker coming up next.
And that's going to give us another comparable position that
have his own
relates to
perspective.
some of the other people in the room.
But you haven't, that's motivism. There you go. So
We're gonna
are
have
you going to
time
do the
for
same thing that I'm doing right now?
I promise.
So can I finish? I'm almost done.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you. I really appreciate you letting me finish. The other example that I would say is, and some of you around here will have very clear memories of this, Redwood Summer, 1990, Judy Berry, brilliant, thoughtful person, bringing forward an important argument where this is about Earth First, the Earth First movement, which many of you here will understand, and this was happening right here. I think Judy Berry was from Mendocino, but I think she was planning to start the Redwood Summer focused right here in Eureka, primarily. And what was that about? What Barry understood that others in Earth First who were motivists, who thought, I know what these people are like, and she said, maybe the loggers who are cutting down some of these trees would have the same opinions that I have, and she started connecting with them, and she was able to bring a coalition of people who recognized that the real power source was from outside of the community, and that it was destroying an industry that might have been able to survive. But I can tell you, I lived in a town where when the logging companies cut all the timber, this was the 1980s, we called it get the cut out. What they did was they closed the mills. You know, if you cut the trees that are certain width and they have to retool, that's millions of dollars to retool when you're putting smaller trees through the mill. This is what happened in Missoula when I was there. Same thing started happening in Eugene when I was there, and it's probably why you see many, many of the mills going down around here too. So I mean, Barry understood that listening to what other people think and asking them why they held that opinion made a coalition between loggers and environmentalists. That's powerful, and that civic engagement that could be useful. So, I mean, I would say right now, in this instance, maybe the thing to do is find out who in this country also has opinions that are close enough to where you are, where you can start to have some discussion with them and get them to move towards what we all really want, which is to stop the killing, right? I mean, stop this madness.
We want justice.
And justice is a part of that, too. Yes.
Yeah.
For sure. So anyway, that's really all I had to say. Build partnerships here in this country to push our government towards in the direction that we want to be effective, to do effective civic engagement. And thanks.
Just a moment.
Thank you.
We're going to have a conversation after this. The speakers for the Pete and others are going to walk to tables as you're talking, and you will be able to talk with them and ask questions for them after this next speaker. So with that, I want to introduce Professor Stuart Altschuler, who teaches in the Addiction Studies program at CR. Welcome.
So I will use the mic, but my students know I never need it. My name is Stuart Altschuler. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. I've been living in Humboldt County, particularly Ferndale, for 17 years, and been teaching at College of the Redwoods for about 16 years. Teaching at Redwoods is one of the last joys I ever experienced to find at almost age 75. I have to say that. And I look around this room, and I have to say, well, that I'm looking out and my eyes see too many people of my own generation sitting here. Okay? When I get into my classroom and I introduce myself to my students, I tell them, since I'm training them to be addiction counselors, they need to know and understand the concept of historical trauma and how it impacts people and addictions to begin with. So in one class on diverse populations, on our section on African Americans, I showed them a 2-hour documentary about Freedom Summer. Some of you none of them know what Freedom Summer was. It was civic engagement where mostly white people, organized by the black community and black leaders, got college students to go from the north and all around the country to Mississippi to live in the homes of African Americans and help register. They created freedom schools. 3 were killed. and that wasn't solved for decades later. It's the understanding of the sociological and the historical context. What I liked about Wednesday night was that it was laying out the sociological and historical context of what's going on. So I want to tell you about an experience that I had. I'm a member of the Humboldt County Democratic Central Committee, and I'm a delegate to the California Democratic Conventions. So in November, we had a convention, and this was right after Israel really... Okay, I want to say before I go any further, I agree it's a genocide, okay? I also believe that Israel has an apartheid society. And I have been feeling this for decades. As a Jewish American, okay? And I know that there are other Jewish Americans in here that have been watching this for decades and have that sadness, because it's a profound sadness to watch this going on. And on a political level, Hamas is not the Palestinians. Most Israelites are not Netanyahu, the same way most Americans are not Trump. The far right in every community has to cause as much pain and violence as they can, or at least the threat of it, in order to maintain power. That's what Hamas has done, that's what Netanyahu and his party has done, that's what Trump and the Republicans have done, and if there are any Republicans in this room, I'm not going to apologize for that statement, okay? So, I'm agreeing with you.
According to Times of Israel, 90% or more of Israeli citizens believe that the amount of force being used in Gaza is not sufficient enough. So when we say it's the far right, is 90% of the population of Israel far right?
Well,
I challenge that
agree.
narrative.
I don't agree with
According
the fact
to
that
Times of Israel are far right.
So, anyway, so I want to get back to an experience I had in November at the California Democratic Convention. So, it was late afternoon, and I had about a 2-hour break between the sessions that went on in the morning and the LGBTQ caucus that I was waiting for to start at 7 o'clock. And I was sitting very comfortably trying to get some rest. And all of a sudden, there were a lot of shouts and Palestinian flags and things on the balcony above where I was sitting. And all of a sudden on J Street, it was in Sacramento at the convention center, all of a sudden on J Street, behind the glass wall and doors where I was sitting, was this amazing group of a few hundred people carrying Palestinian flags and bullhorns and all this stuff behind me. Basically, they shut down the convention that evening, and at a certain point, I know I have to make this quick, but what happened was they shut down the convention center and the security escorted as many people out as they could. I was stuck between the protesters up there and the protesters on the street behind me, okay? I surrendered to it. I took out my camera and I started filming this whole thing. I always thought, gee, how do people know to start filming these things? You just know. Okay? All of a sudden, the people from the street were let in, okay? It wasn't by permission or anything. And I followed them all up to the next level. And when I got up there, this Palestinian man came over to me and he said, "What time's the election?" I said, "What election?" He said, "Isn't there an election tonight?" And I said, "That already took place. It was done remotely on our phones." And I could see his face drop because their goal was to disrupt the endorsement election. So instead, they did a sit-in. You all remember sit-ins? right? They did a sit-in, and this guy and I started talking, and I could feel the confrontation coming. And I said, before you go any further, okay, I'm a Jewish American, and I wish there was a ceasefire right now. You're not going to get any argument from me on that. And within a few minutes, there was 6 men from this demonstration and myself standing there having this conversation. As soon as I said, look, I'm Jewish American and I support the ceasefire and I wish the president would come out in favor of it, and we started into this conversation that was probably one of the most moving and profound conversations I've ever had with anyone. And it was just that, a conversation. There were a lot of things that were said. And we were in agreement on all of them. And in that group was this, he couldn't have been more than 17 years old, and his head was down as like he didn't have his voice yet. He had no confidence, you could see. But I could see him leaning forward, and he said, can I ask a question? And I leaned into him, and I said, sure. And he said, I saw on the internet that all Israelis want to kill all Palestinians. Is that true?
90%.
And I said to him, what I say to all of my students, don't believe everything you read on the internet. Go deeper. Most Israelis want peace. Most Palestinians want peace. They all want their own home and safety in their own home. And this just, he ended up asking more questions because as soon as he saw I was listening to him, he found his voice. It was very moving. So when I got back, James Falk, anybody ever see his show on Key, Headline Humboldt, okay? He interviewed me about this and did a report on it. So he defined CIVIC as the object of political protest is to bring attention to a cause and stimulate dialogue, okay? So I was in college from 68 to 72, and this is what I tell my students. What was going on in 68 to 72? Civil rights movement, women's rights movement, Cesar Chavez was going on, huh?
The Black Panthers.
The Black Panthers were going on. The gay rights movement started in '69, and because of that, I was able to come out of the closet as a proud gay man in 1971. I mean, that was early.
Leonard
Okay.
Peltier.
Huh?
Leonard Peltier. American Indian Movement.
All of this was going on, and Vietnam, and the drug culture, and I was at Woodstock, and all of this stuff was going on at the same time. In 1970, there was a student strike from one end of this country to the other. We shut down every campus in this country. Okay? Anybody remember the student strike in 70? Okay? It's important to know that there's that kind of power. And I bless you with the type of power and energy you bring to this. I understand, I may not understand you personally, but I understand the anger. Okay, I hope you get that I really do.
But we're not 17-year-old kids who need you to give confidence. We don't need your blessing.
I'm not giving
really,
you.
Talk about Ivory Tower, but this is a lot.
Okay, this is a lot. Okay, and I'm comparing my experience, Ivory Tower, yes, most definitely. But it's the student activism, it's that age group, and into the 30s, where so much of that passion and that energy comes from and has to come from. And we need to educate people that it's okay for that energy to come out of that. All right? So things that they said to me in that conversation, all right, one of them looked at me and said, "We feel invisible. Nobody's paying attention to us." Okay? Boy, did that resonate back to the 60s and 70s. If you're parents, you know that your kid, if you're not paying attention to them, that tantrum's going to get louder and louder and louder, and more violent, and more violent, and more violent. That's the way kids get your attention, and if you don't pay attention to them early, it explodes. It's the same thing that happened in the 60s and 70s. I lived through the AIDS crisis, and it's the same thing that we weren't seen and we weren't heard, and people were dying here by the thousands, and nobody in our government were paying attention to us. We were going to memorial after memorial after memorial, and burying our friends one after the other, and nobody was paying attention to us. We weren't seen. So you get a group like ACT UP, who made sure that we were seen and we were heard. And what happened, what happened Wednesday night, with I think the same group that you're with, as soon as you got the microphone, you were seen, you were heard, and the energy softened. And when they said we feel invisible, what?
It was so harmful to our psyches, we couldn't even stay for the discussion.
Yes.
We were seen and heard, yes, but it took forever. This is such
But what I'm saying to you, I'm a psychotherapist. I hear what you're saying about the damage to your psyche.
We could go degree for degree, bud.
Okay. Yes, I get it. I have been helping people with wounded psyches for 50 years as a therapist.
Oh, God.
Okay? And what happens is there's no quick answer. You want Biden and Harris and everybody to come out immediately and say,
Arms embargo.
arms embargo now. Arms embargo now. That's all.
We want it now because thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people have died already.
I agree.
It has to happen now. It is urgent.
And I agree, and it's not going to happen.
But why?
Not now. It will.
Will it?
Yeah, I believe so. What I said to these guys during that conversation, when I say, why won't the Democratic Party pass a resolution condemning this? Why won't Biden say? And my response to them was, what they can say in public, unfortunately this is politics, is different than what they're saying behind the scenes. And I guarantee that Biden was giving Netanyahu a piece of his mind. And it was a week later that there was a ceasefire and hostages were released. Okay? So
That was a long time ago.
it was a long time ago, and a lot of people have died. Okay? I'm not disagreeing with any of you about any of this. Okay? And I hear how painful this is for those of you who, well, to all of us, it's painful for all of us.
Thank you. It's painful for all of us.
Right.
That's why we're here.
And that's why we're here.
Because we feel the pain.
Okay? We feel the pain, and this is about dialogue, because that dialogue is the first step to the activism, and the young people that are back there from Cal Poly, and I actually see a couple of my own students, I'm glad to say, from CR. My job as a teacher is to get them to speak up and get active in these things, okay? I have a challenge, and this may sound very political, which it is. I have a challenge for those of you who want to start passing the torch to the others, to the younger people, okay?
We already have the torch.
We already know. That's why we're not in the room. I hope you know that.
We're out there.
Look, and
We're
we
out
see
there.
older people in this room. It's because the young people are awake and we see it. We've been been witnessing it live stream for a year, witnessing slaughter for a year.
We're all watching.
We are. I don't think you're seeing what I'm seeing, or you would be in the streets.
Okay, so I won't go into what I was going to challenge you to do, but what I want to say is you don't know what I'm seeing. You don't. And for you to make those assumptions is as wrong as me assuming anything about you. Okay? You don't know the pain that many of us sit in front of our TVs and watch, and we're looking for ways and avenues to address it.
You should see what's not on the TV. See what's not on the TV. What's
Okay.
being live streamed by civilians. Live streamed by civilians. You are getting an edited cut of what the U.S. government is okay with you knowing.
I do
I am watching actual babies being beheaded by bombs. I am watching the entrails of children strung across fucking towns. This is not what you're seeing on fucking ABC or CBS. I know it's not.
I do watch it. Okay?
This is what compels the teenagers, the college kids, the 30-year-olds. This is our world.
Yes.
We are living in it. We're stuck with it. It must stop now. It's horror what we're witnessing.
Yes.
And no, I don't know what you've seen. But I will tell you what, the people that I know who are seeing what I've seen are driven to direct action. I thought this was about civic engagement. And this group did not invite the one organization that has been consistently, civically engaged regarding Palestine and activism for the liberation of Palestine in Humboldt County. We did not get a call, we did not get an email, we did not get a message. We were not invited to the table. You did not want to hear our opinions. And so we disrupt so that we can be heard, because we are not brought to the table. We do not have a seat at this table.
I want to hear your opinion. And I'm listening.
Let's do it. Let's switch. Thank you, Stuart. So, for exactly that reason, we're going to transition now. I've asked the speakers, both Pete and Stuart, to go to tables, as I said I was going to do earlier, to answer questions, to have conversations with you about your questions and concerns about things that they've said. And they're open to doing that, so I appreciate that. But because this is a night about civic engagement and activism, and because I know there are so many people here who have experience in civic engagement and activism here that are from different movements. Actually, let's do this. Let's do this right now. I want to see people stand up if you were involved in a particular activism. I'm not going to be able to name them all. I apologize. Let me just think about, let's go all the way back to the civil rights movement. If you were involved in the civil rights movement and you can stand, or you know somebody directly involved in that civil rights movement, please stand. If you were involved in anti-war activist movements, please stand. If you've been involved in the Black Lives Matter movement, please stand. You're ready. Environmental movement, please stand. Anti-gun violence movement, please stand. We've got a lot of wisdom here from different movements. And we're going to have time for discussion here in a second. What I want to do now is I want to set each of you free in your own tables to talk amongst yourselves, because what we've got to do now is we've got to figure out how to move forward after these difficult conversations. We've got to figure out what the kinds of philosophies, the kinds of theories, and the kinds of strategies so that we can move forward to make a difference for peace and justice going forward after this conference ends, after this community conversation ends. So there are some table facilitators at each table, and I want you to talk amongst yourselves we've got about 20 minutes, and then Rabbi Naomi's going to come up. We'll transition to some dinner time.
Hey everybody, while they are doing table discussions, I'm going to go outside and see what the protest looks like, giving people in here a chance to have somewhat candid conversations off camera, and we'll go see what's going on outside.
Money for fascist state.
Israel is a fascist state.
1, 2, 3, 4.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Genocide no more.
Genocide no more.
5, 6, 7, 8.
5, 6, 7, 8.
America is a fascist state.
America is a fascist state.
Israel is a fascist state.
Israel is a fascist state.
Israel is a terrorist state.
Israel is a terrorist state.
America is a terrorist state.
America is a terrorist state.
Brick by brick, wall by wall.
Brick by brick, wall by wall.
We'll be here till apartheid falls.
We'll be here till apartheid falls.
Brick by brick, wall by wall.
Brick by brick, wall by wall.
We'll be here till Israel falls.
We'll be here till Israel falls.
We'll be here till apartheid falls.
We'll be here till apartheid falls.
We'll be here till Israel 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 falls.
We will honor all our martyrs.
We will honor all our martyrs.
All our parents, mothers, fathers.
All our parents, mothers, fathers.
We will honor all our martyrs.
We will honor all our martyrs.
All our children, sons and daughters.
All our children, sons and daughters.
From Palestine to Wounded Knee.
From Palestine to Wounded Knee.
Stop the U.S. war machine.
Stop the U.S. war machine.
From Congo to Palestine.
From Congo to Palestine.
Imperialism is a crime.
Imperialism is a crime.
From Palestine to Iraq.
From Palestine to Iraq.
Yankees go home, do not come back.
Yankees go home, do not come back.
I need a break. Who's next? I'm hitting buttons now.
Accidentally set off the siren there. So I am told by security hired for this event that there are local law enforcement agents, Eureka Police to be specific, I think, staging somewhere nearby in case this protest evolves. So local law enforcement tells me they are ready to respond should there be a need for any intervention from them. And inside right now they're still taking part in individual table discussions about civic engagement, civil disobedience, and discussing effective ways to convey political positions and standpoints to people who may have opposing views. So that is generally the discussion taking place inside, and we'll go back in just a minute.
get it to that line, I get it in. If you get it to this line, if you get it to this line, but you can't cross it. But you can't cross it.
These people are like that. They just, that's why I did go there in 1977.
And I get to edit it. That's what that's
During the war. I traveled to northern Asia. The Christians and Muslims were fighting it out. The bombs were going over up there. The military presence.
Those would be my two questions.
On the Western Wall, all over.
You guys play soccer with a Waterloo can. Can I play? Yeah. You'll be ref. No.
Every fifth goal was a tracer. It was like
You gotta chase it. But you can't go over this line. And you got
I mean, and when I was over there, I remember going to Jericho.
Oh, stop. Okay. All right. Okay, everybody, we're out here with the Humboldt for Palestine group, checking out the protest and the images of martyred children here. So we're going to talk with Jamila, and I wanted to ask you, let me get the camera, I'm sorry. There we go. There we go. That's better. Okay. I wanted to ask you how you felt about how the event has gone so far. I know you were here on the first night. You did make a statement with the microphone eventually. But I wanted to know if you had been invited and if that conversation took place. How did that go?
Yeah, so we were invited. I had never heard anything about this event until maybe about a month before it was happening. A friend had sent me the details. I wasn't really surprised that we weren't reached out to, but yeah, I know that they planned this event for months. So just the fact that there was like one Palestinian speaker. We're a very visible organization that's very active, doing lots of film screenings and panel discussions and educational and cultural activities.
Right.
We're very easy to contact. So, I mean, it's deliberate, and we knew just based off of the agenda that it was just going to be a normalization event, normalizing Israel's existence, their violence against Palestinians, and that's very much what this event has been, to a really actually a disgusting degree. So yeah, so we're here, we are rejecting this normalization of violence, and these people are not qualified to speak about what's actually going on. They have a retired historian who won't even name this as an apartheid, illegal occupation, genocide. So that's just terrible in and of itself, and she's just continued to be a speaker, just basically spewing propaganda and normalizing this violence. And so it's far more disappointing than I know I was anticipating. And so yeah, we're here, we're protesting that, and these people should not be speaking for Palestinians. And there's plenty of local Palestinians that can be speaking for Palestine.
Right. Okay. If you had been given an opportunity to have a section dedicated to you giving knowledge and your 2 cents on the matter, what would have been your focus?
Everything would be almost the opposite. Yesterday's event, there was a ton of conversation focusing on the Jewish Holocaust. What does the Palestinian genocide have to do with the Jewish Holocaust? Why are we talking about that when there's a horrific genocide happening right now that we're paying for as U.S. citizens? So really, the only conversations that should be happening around this are a plan to end arms to Israel and to dismantle the settler state. I mean, and just a couple of days ago, the United Nations passed a resolution, I believe it was 149 votes, voted yes to dismantle the Israeli occupation, and that includes immediate military cessation, immediate cessation of new settlements being built, Israeli settlers to be evacuated from the region, dismantling of the apartheid wall, reparations to Palestinians, right of return for Palestinians. The world wants this. The world sees what Israel's doing. So that's where we could really be actually mobilizing people to be educated about what this actually is and how to be involved in ending this, because we are U.S. citizens paying for it with our tax dollars. Like, we have a duty. So we could have been much more productive if we had been invited to not just participate, but actually lead something like this. So,
okay.
Yeah.
So, lacking a focus on current events in Gaza and at the hands of Israel, right? That would be an emphasis you would have had.
Yeah, and like, I mean, we could talk about the history, and certainly we should talk about, you know, the Nakba and Israel's creation and why it is an illegal apartheid state. Exactly. But let's talk about present, you know, like Israel's planting of bombs in pagers and cell phones that just exploded in Lebanon and killed children, bombing Beirut now, and assassinating leaders. Like, let's talk about the current events that are so important to be, because apparently people are not actually paying attention to what's going on. They're not watching Palestinians being massacred, you know, in the thousands, you know, soon to be 1 million. So yeah, like, let's bring people up to speed here, and we could have been really successful at that. So it's just really unfortunate that this has just not only caused more harm, but actively harmed Palestinians and anybody that's advocating to end this.
So I see everybody out here on the third day, and I'm thinking, you know, is a protest or a rally sort of a last resort, or because you're not able to be heard inside, or is this sort of a method also apart from the conference? Like, talk about what it means to protest, because there's you know, debate. I shouldn't call it debate, but there are people who think that it's worthless to protest in Humboldt about something that's overseas, right? So could you speak to that a little bit? Like, what good is it?
Well, I think especially in this context, with the third day being about civic engagement, and one of the questions that this day is framed on is, you know, does it matter who's listening? And our response is like, yeah, who's listening? So here, listen to us. You know, firstly, if you're going to hold an educational event about this topic in our community, like, expect resistance if it's going to be the same kind of normalization propaganda. So, I mean, really, this protest here is in no way going to just free Palestine, you know, immediately, but people have been seriously misinformed by this event, and so, I mean, we are protesting that in and of itself. And also, yeah, are you listening? Like, who's listening? And also, like, let us speak. Give us the mic. Let's tell the truth here. Let's actually tell the objective truth here.
I don't know.
Okay, thank you. Do you have any other thoughts? Anything to
Free
add?
Palestine.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing with those thoughts with us.
Thank you.
I don't know. I mean, do you think that I'm a full-blood Jew? I'm a full-blood Jew. I believe in my...
But all the relatives I know of that are having
It's a cultural thing to me. I'm what they call a Jew.
Are they going in there for the dinner?
They love my blood at the blood donor place.
Only mosquito females bite you. Wait, what?
High stakes.
Yeah. I'd fumble my words. I'd say something silly.
Where you going, man?
Do you think they're still going in there?
They're empty. Yeah, here's the photos. But no one's inside.
That's what you get for showing off.
Yes.
But I'm on camera.
That's why I'm here right now.
It's an art workout.
It is. Right, size that. I took a whole walk around. Size for those. I don't know.
I was sure they were going to when we brought out the big megaphone.
I was there on the first day.
Good grief.
I was really disappointed with how it went. Oh god. Oh, great. I was
Okay, we'll go back in and see how the forum is going.
We've connected with these two activists from Humble for Palestine who've agreed to read 2 short prepared statements. So I want to welcome Genevieve first, and then Gigi will go afterwards before we transition.
Thank you very much for your attention. I want you to know this was written with, oh, take my mask off?
It's easier to hear you.
Oh, okay.
It's a little less, if that's okay with you.
Okay.
And you're so beautiful.
No, I just did this on half hour's notice, just so you know. Okay, I'll just begin. On this unceded Wiyot land, at a time when missing and or murdered Indigenous loved ones continue to be ignored by so-called public safety officers, sometimes the rest of us, and when Native studies and Native housing is being stripped of funding, after CPH did use the notion of supporting Native community to obtain Cal Poly status, I reiterate local and national student demand for CPH and CSU-wide divestment from occupation, which is criminal, illegal settlements, more than 700,000 illegal settlers on Palestinian land, ethnic cleansing, and now it's genocide, and if you want to be technical, it's plausible genocide by the law in a case that is going at a snail's pace during annihilation. Divest from all arms manufacturers tied to the death, destruction, and remember, ecocide, which affects all of us. So do that in Palestine and anywhere else. We are 76 years into US-backed apartheid Israeli dispossession, occupation, the ethnic cleansing, and now genocide of the indigenous Palestinian people on their own land. Albert Einstein warned the world in 1948, and it's published in the New York Times if you'd like to read it, that murderous Zionist terror gangs, which went on to establish apartheid Israel and become its leaders on top of Palestine, they were replicating Nazism and fascism. 1948 is the same year the apartheid regime was established. Anyone know? South Africa. Under international law, apartheid has one mandate. Did you know? Dissolve. Through a diversity of tactics, struggle, armed resistance even, Nelson Mandela was released from prison, and finally, apartheid was dissolved in South Africa in the 1990s. Only recently did the US government take him off the terror list. Please remember that. Please internalize that when you hear terrorist. Mandela famously said, quote, "Our freedom is incomplete without the freedom of Palestinians." Yes. End quote. Prior to last year, polls asked Palestinians what a solution looks like to them. Overwhelmingly, and these have sources, they answered, one state with right of return honored and equal rights for everyone. Yes. The World Court, slow as it is, sometimes a colonial tool as it is, even it could not deny and recently made clear the apartheid state of Israel on top of Palestine must be dissolved and a new state restructured from scratch. Don't know if you knew that. The World Court has also made clear that the Boycott, Divest, and Sanction Campaign, BDS, everyone say it? BDS, must become the law of the land everywhere. Look it up. That's why the US and Israel are having a pressure campaign and are intimidating them and threatening them. You likely know that the US war on the Vietnamese people who took up armed resistance was met with years of US protest and public outcry. Here, in a country built by kidnapped enslaved people on stolen native land, massacres like My Lai and others managed to rock the consciences of Americans. Yet asked later, decades later, James Baldwin said they're all our children. Do you agree? Do you know how many have been killed from U.S. aggression just since 9/11 in the Southwest Asia and North Africa areas that colonial Euro-Americans call the Middle East? It's over 4 million. Look it up. Just lost my place, I'm sorry. Now the U.S. military outpost there on top of Palestine is carrying out its campaign of annihilation on its indigenous. We saw that Greater Israel map, the old Zionist slogan of from the Euphrates to the Nile, or whatever it's, taking from Iraq, taking from Syria, taking from Lebanon, taking from Egypt. It is land theft of the indigenous people. It is our job, therefore, as Americans paying for this slaughter in your paycheck. Your taxes are funding this slaughter, and it is a sadistic slaughter, one that I hope will rock your consciousness, and don't be afraid of that because it is not okay for you to look away. Let it move you. It is our job to resist. It is our job to educate ourselves for appropriate resistance and to support Palestinian resistance like South Africa. Speaking for myself, raising 3 Palestinian children who, yes, have been called terrorists, yes, have watched watermelons be broken in front of them, being told to get out, right here in Eureka, over there in Eureka, in their schools, being told their people deserve, or they should all die because it's God's plan. Being told that saying that makes people tired, their school, who are in charge. I ask that this community not allow the degradation of your own humanity. Don't let states, which do not have the right to resist, do not let them dehumanize people who have a right to exist and to resist their own annihilation. I'm almost done. I read this account online. My husband was on the phone with a friend, quote, who was from Gaza. My husband made a comment about this all being a test. It's just a test. The man from Gaza said, well, it's not a test for us. We already passed. This is a test for the rest of the world. One more quote from an American mother. She said, quote, I cannot stress enough how important it is to wake up every morning and insist that we live in a world where children are not airstriked at their playground. Are not airstriked at their playground. A target where children are a target. Israel has done that, and it isn't just this last year during the genocide. It has done that before. Those are documented sources you can look up, end quote. They are counting on our fatigue and hopelessness. We cannot let them win. Already, final paragraph. It is reported by medical journals, by writers, and Ralph Nader, take with what you will, they are documented, detailed sources, because it's not just the people who are shot at, directly bombed, etc., exploded. It is the people who died because cancer centers aren't there, diabetes centers aren't there, they died from injuries, etc. later. They're under the rubble, and they know that they're dead, but they were counted, identified.
Shot in their hospital beds.
Shot execution style in their hospital beds. Grandmothers, 4% are elderly. Why? Because some of them still have the key to their homes from the Nakba. Already 7 to 22% of the total population of Gaza, which started out at 2.3 million, already 7 to 22% have been killed since 10/7. It is the quickest acceleration of death we've seen in modern times. And I want you to know something. We are 345 million here in America. That's the equivalent, 7 to 22%, of 24 to 75 million dead. It is ongoing and it must be stopped. It violates the Geneva Conventions, international laws, U.S. Leahy laws. Demand an arms embargo now. Don't let them win. It will take all of us standing up, educating ourselves, and resisting and supporting Palestinian resistance. Whatever that looks like, by any means necessary. Free Palestine, decolonize everywhere, land back. Our survival as a species requires it, and so does the saving of our humanity.
question is for every single person here today. I remember weeping when we began to learn about the European Holocaust of Jews in grade school. I came home with so many questions, especially for my grandparents. Did you know this was happening? What did you do? Why didn't people stop it? The youth, you must understand, have clear eyes to witness injustice. They don't accept arguments of nuance or false claims of ancient religious tensions. They clearly identify right and wrong, just and unjust, and call it by name. I truly believe that is because the youth have been educated so deeply about the Holocaust that we can so clearly identify and take action against the Holocaust of Palestinians by Israel. So my question to you is, what will you say to your children and your grandchildren when they learn of the genocide of Palestinians? What will you tell them when they look you in the eyes and ask you what you did to stop the first genocide in history to be live streamed and witnessed in real time by the entire world? Will you tell them you justified the atrocious acts of white supremacist, colonial, imperialist regime under the guise of Holocaust trauma or 2,000-year-old ties? Will you tell them you attended a dinner and discussion about both sides while Israel is starving Palestinians to death? Will you tell them you condemned disruptive direct action because it made you uncomfortable or it was inconvenient? What have you done to stop this genocide? What have you done to reject the normalization of mass war crimes, apartheid, ethnic cleansing, and genocide in the name of safety for Jews over others? What have you done to absolve yourself on your own judgment day? What have you laid on the line? In the words of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., the hottest place in hell is reserved for those who remain neutral in times of great moral conflict. Every man must decide whether he will walk in the light of creative altruism or in the darkness of destructive selfishness. Well-intending people who do nothing are exactly how genocides are allowed to happen. What will you say to your God and your grandbabies on your judgment day? If you'd like to know more about how you can become more civically engaged for Palestine on a local level, please, I invite you to come speak with me outside the event after it's over, or reach out to us on Instagram at Humble for Palestine. Thank you.
Thank you, Gigi. Thank you, Genevieve. Speaking personally, I appreciate you challenging us to broaden this conversation. I'm glad that you guys shared, so thank you.
Thank you.
I want to transition to a different part of the evening now. I'm going to welcome Bishop Paul back up to the stage here, where he's going to transition us into a time for a ritual.
I just want to acknowledge the heaviness and the pain, the difficulty, the challenges that we're feeling and we're experiencing. It's real. You feel it. It exists. It's happening. And you're coming together. You're sitting together at tables, having conversations, difficult, challenging conversations. But that's what it takes for us to get through this and be better for our children, for our posterity, for all of humanity. That's what it's going to take to weed out the contention and to replace that with love and forgiveness, which is incredibly difficult. I know. But that's the hard work that we are tasked with. And that's what we'll do. because we love our children and we want to instill hope into our children. All children, absolutely all children, all of us, we're all brothers and sisters living on this beautiful planet with so much diversity. Let's not lose that. Thank you all for being here. I want to transition some time over now to Rabbi Steinberg for the Shabbat.
Folks at this church have been very kind to the community in general, opening up their beautiful space for the communal sing that we used to do once a year of different faith communities coming together to sing. It was very, very meaningful. That doesn't happen in very many communities. And they've been gracious with their space, with their hearts, and their volunteers getting some supper ready for us. And they've been waiting patiently to help us be served with that supper. So we're sorry that Imam Abu Bakr couldn't be with us today because he's of course with the Muslim community for their gathering today. But we were so appreciative that he led prayer on Wednesday very beautifully. I haven't been in a mosque in many years because I hardly ever leave Humboldt. And I was so moved to get to hear the prayers. I am a pretty religious person, and I take all this very seriously. And I take the negative role of religion in our history very seriously. And I feel it's very important for everybody to be totally upfront about what are the blessings of religious traditions and what havoc our traditions have wrought. And I see a tremendous religious extremism in the world today, and it's very painful. And we were kind enough to have the Imam last night. Tonight, right now, the sun is about to go down, and that makes the mark of the Jewish Shabbat, the Sabbath, which we observe from sundown Friday to sundown Saturday. Some of us all that time, some of us just a little bit. The essence of Shabbat is from the verb to pause, to stop, to change your direction. And it's very hard to do. But without some pausing from things that are weighing so heavily on our hearts, we just will break. We will break. And I believe what the world wants of us is lifetime activism. Don't burn out. I told myself decade after decade, don't burn out. Some of us scream with a loud voice, some of us are screaming silently, and that becomes part of our spiritual tradition. As we move into Shabbat, we try to let go of some of the things that are really troubling our minds. I want to say that I apologize. I feel we were really negligent. On Wednesday, I wanted to mention the horrific crisis in Lebanon, and then it was worse on Thursday. And it is so much worse today with the bombing of Beirut, which I can barely speak because I'm so upset about that. But it's going to be Shabbat, and I need to let that go, and I need to transition into positive thinking. And the discipline of positive thinking is perhaps the toughest discipline in the world. We naturally go to our wounds and our injuries. They demand our attention as they should. So for us, our Shabbat is a practice of gratitude. I think everybody who is here because they're in deep pain over these issues. But everybody who's here is also blessed to be able to walk in the door or wheelchairs here. I see no assistive devices, but some of you have them, to walk in the door, to roll in the door. If we can do that here, we all have something to be incredibly thankful for. So I'm going to invite you to transition into a quick ritual of Shabbat with us. Rabbi Bob is going to help me. And then we have grape juice for everyone. We have a big challah, traditional bread of Shabbat. And then we have a meal to serve you. And I'm going to give you the invitation to try out, you might want to experiment, try out the Shabbat discipline, that the Shabbat meal is an oasis for the spirit. It's an oasis in time. We have no cathedrals. And as you heard me describe very clearly on Wednesday, our tradition is centered on text, teaching, not on territory. Shabbat is the place we go. Shabbat is, in my mind, the holy place. And every piece of ground is the holy earth. So Rabbi Bob, would you help me please, dear? I was going to invite people, let's sound our shofar out, and then I'll invite people to join us around that little table. We're also in the month of Elul. The Jewish calendar is a lunar calendar, a combination of lunar and solar forces. And during this month we sound the shofar, and the shofar is made from a ram's horn. The technology is very ancient, and we sound it for numerous reasons, and one of the traditions is that, and I was so grateful everybody gave Abu Bakr attention for his rituals. One reason we sound it, there's a teaching that you should listen to the voice of the shofar to hear the wailing of your enemies' relatives. There's a character called Sisera in the Torah, who's pictured as an enemy, and when she gets the news that her son has been killed in battle, she wails. And so we sound the shofar to arouse compassion for our adversaries. On the holiest day of the year, we think not of enmity, but how can we think about our adversaries with deep, total compassion. I want to comment before we sound that this shofar we've had at Temple Bethel for many, many, many years, and it's very precious to me because it has a sticker on it that says, "Made in Palestine." So, what year was this made?
Pre-1948.
Pre-1948, exactly. So it was made by Jews living there who identified themselves as Palestinian Jews, and many of them had families that went back centuries, and they were proud of their Palestinian Jewish heritage. And God forbid anybody take this sticker off. I'll be very angry if anybody washes it. People to come and gather in this corner. Please leave your seats. Come and gather in this little corner. And in their wisdom, the church follows the rules of the fire marshal, and they do not allow candles, so we have these candles. So I need somebody who has their eyes in. I need somebody who I don't have my glasses on. Can somebody see how to put these candles in? Shannon, thank you. You go in there, you go in there. Yeah, the batteries go in and they'll go right on.
Before we say the blessing, I just want to mention that our tradition says on the sixth day, after all the work of creation, the Holy One said, I need to take a break. The Holy One didn't say it's all done. The Holy One said, we need to take a break, to stop, to appreciate who we are, where we are, what we've done, and then come sundown tomorrow, the work starts again.
Say shalom bimgoma, huya ase shalom aleinu, ve'al Yisrael, ve'al kol yoshvei tevel, v'imru amen. May the one who is making peace high above in the heavenly plain make peace for all of us who dwell on earth, and let us say turn to someone by you and you can wish them Shabbat Shalom or just a peaceful weekend or Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat cup of juice for everyone, a little bit of grape juice. There is a traditional blessing for it. You can wait for the blessing or just enjoy. Trevor, can I ask you to take the whole thing, darling? You're faster and stronger than I am.
I'm going to share this.
he told the story of his whole life, starting from his childhood, going through to his senior years, and how his views on many subjects evolved. And I thought as I listened that Bob's story is really the story of the Jewish American community of these near 80 years. He celebrates his 80th birthday in October, Bezrat Hashem. And it's a story of mixed narratives, some fact, some fiction, some fantasy, some dreams, some mythology, and it's a deeply painful process to unravel those threads and still hold on to what is good in your tradition. And that's the process that many of us in the American Jewish community are going through right now. Extremely painful. And how to support our friends, relatives, colleagues in Israel and Palestine in ways that are really going to be helpful. It's an extremely difficult time for us. So I dearly wanted to have these conversations because I wanted to hear what other people had to say. I wanted to hear other voices. I wanted to learn. I think about this. I can't say 24/7, but it's on my mind 24/6 because I'm grateful for Shabbat. And I have trouble sleeping. I wake up in the morning and I check all the papers. I check the Israeli papers. I read Al Jazeera. I read The Guardian. I read PBS. I read NPR. I read everything I can get my hands on. And it's crushing my soul. And I have to find a way for it not to crush my soul. So I was very grateful to your story, Bob, because even though I'm not quite at the 80 mark myself, but I'm past the 70 mark. And the story made so much sense. And I wish all Jewish America could hear your story. And your Kiddush. Kiddush. Kiddush is from the word I spoke about on Wednesday. Kedushah is the Hebrew word for holiness that means separate, other, really, really set apart. And so the name of this blessing, we call it the Kiddush.
Yom HaShishi. It was evening and it was morning, the sixth day. V'yechul hashamayim v'haaretz v'chol tzva'am v'echal Elohim ben Yom HaShvi'i melachto asher asa v'yishbot b'yom HaShvi'i mikol melachto asher asa v'yvarach Elohim ben Yom HaShvi'i v'ykadesh oto kivo Shabbat mikol melachto asher bara Elohim la'asot. Baruch atah Eloheinu melech haolam borei b'riah kafin. Baruch atah Eloheinu melech haolam asher kishar b'mitzvotav v'ratzav banu v'shamat kosho v'ahava uv'ratzon hinkilanu zikaron l'maaseh b'reishit. Yom Tehillah, let me cry Kodesh, Zecher L'Tziat Mitzrayim, Kivanu v'harta, Ve'otanu kidashta, Im kol ha'amim, Ve'shavat kodshecha,
blessing. Sometimes there's a ritual washing of the hands, but the blessing actually says, who commands the raising of the hands. So I'll invite anybody who's comfortable who would like to with me. Just as you make this blessing, to raise your hands. We love to do this at our Shabbat table at home and at the synagogue. And I love to look around. And when I look around here, I see all the hands that are doing a beautiful work in the world. I see the hands of healers, and the hands of helpers, and the hands of visionaries, and the hands of people who are struggling. But I see really good hands here. We can all put our hands into service for the ideals that we are so essential to our world and to our hearts. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu al netilat yadayim. Pastor Lisa, would you uncover the flower, please, darling? Would you hold it up? Take it from underneath, yeah.
So we have a tradition that says if you can't put your hand directly on the challah, put your hand on someone who has a hand on the challah, and maybe put your hand on somebody who has a hand on somebody who has a hand on somebody who has a hand. And then the energy of the challah is transmitted all the way across.
Want a hand? Are you good? And I want to honor Basilisa, our young woman holding up that challah, because she's going to become bat mitzvah in January and wrestle with our ancient texts. And we read the text and we read a lot that is lovely and inspiring, and we read a lot which is deplorable. And we put it in its historical context. And in our tradition, every student has the opportunity and the responsibility to reinterpret the texts for her time. So she's going to do that for us in January. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, hamotzi lechem min haaretz.
Now the trick is to see if you can actually get a little piece of the challah.
Everybody's too polite. Come on, come on. And supper will be served in moments. We want to especially thank the church folk who've been waiting